Which one did you just... You read the second
Patience.
Lisa...
Yeah.
Yeah, how was that for you?
It went so much harder than I anticipated. The problem is, like, I was fully with it, but it's from 2010. And so I was like, okay, BDSM, it's like a dom-sub relationship. And it's, like, very much, like, he's constantly talking to her about, like, the dynamics of the relationship and why, like, her submitting to him is pleasing to him, which is ultimately pleasing to her, like, all of this, right? And I was so with it. And then they had one really long conversation that was basically what it boiled down to was, like, like, all women, it's their purpose from God to be submissive to their husbands, and the husband has to be, like, dominant and caring and do all these things, right? And I was like, oh, like, you had me. I was with you until you said... and they were, like, they basically, like, he was like, oh, this is, like, everyone's purpose ultimately, but, like, very few will ever achieve the level that we achieve. Like, as if every husband and wife, should be a dominant submissive relation. Once again, if you are related to me, if you haven't already turned this podcast off, I sure would appreciate it if you did so now. You've already heard too much. Anyway, I was, like, with it, especially... Listen... There was one scene, and I knew it was coming, and it gave me what I wanted, and I was like, okay, and we got to the point where I thought it was gonna wind down, and I was satisfied, and then it kept going, and I was like...
That is the best. That is
shocking.
The best. What was it? There's I believe it's The Lady Tempts and Heir by Harper St. George. I've put this in another review before. Where you think the scene's over, and he's, like, cleaning her up, and he's like, actually... While I'm down here, I'm just going to finger you again. And we're going to go for it. And I was like,
so that's
beautiful, right?
Well, but it happened twice. There was one point at which... Yeah, well, not that specific thing. That was the second time. The first time I was like, I think we're done. And then it wasn't. And it took it up another level. And I was like, all right, well, you unlocked something. And, well, that thing in me was already unlocked, but I've never seen it done in a book before.
Oh, God.
Well, I should say, I've never seen it done in a traditionally published romance before, because I mean indie erotica is doing and has been
they go hard,
right? But I don't read a ton of indie, and I also don't read a ton of erotica, so I was like shocked to find this in a traditionally published historical from 2010. So already I was like, wow, you got me on board. And then he did basically that. They were like, what if we just threw in some, like, overstimulation and unexpected orgasming? And I was like, I thought we had all finished. In fact, we had all finished twice. And then let's add a third. And I was like, okay, sure. Anyway, it was wild. And if it hadn't been for that kind of weird religious overtone where it kept coming back to, like, this is your ultimate purpose and you're Eve who was created to submit to Adam, if we could have gotten rid of that, I would have been fully on board. As it was, I was mostly on board.
One foot was, like, dangling off the train, but she wasn't going to jump.
I was like...
She was staying on for the ride.
I mean, it was the same thing with Passion, rather, where I was, like, almost all the way there. You could have given me all the weird sex stuff, and I still would have been on board. Welcome. Welcome to Romance Your TBR. It's just banter. It's just banter actually could be...
It's just banter.
What you call every... like, book that's marketed as a rom-com. It's just banter. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love banter.
My least favorite thing is when a rom-com is like, I'm a rom-com, and then I laugh 0 times. And I'm just like, just throw in, like, a dad joke. Like, I'll laugh, but, like, there are no jokes. And I'm just like...
There is a book that I read, and I won't say which one it is, or I can tell you later if you want, but I don't think you would have read it anyway. I did recently read a contemporary romance. And, like, the author is funny, and I've read another book of theirs, and it was funny, and I liked it, and there were some really, really good scenes. But this one, I think I just like contemporary romance a lot of the time. Not all the time. There are some excellent ones, but a lot of the time they give me the ick. Because it'll be just, like, them hanging out, and they're, like, 20 to 30-year-old adults, so, like, my age or a little older, and they're, like, hanging out, and then you're writing their banter, and it's, like, it's just, like, I don't like it. I don't, like, if it's not really, really funny,
Yeah.
and then it describes, like, them cracking up together, and I'm not laughing, then I'm, like,
that is
super uncomfortable.
the worst. And you're just like, what? Why
Yeah,
laugh?
like, she'll be, like,
What?
like, dying laughing at something the hero said, that I'm like, "It was amusing." But it wasn't, like,
it was jarring.
It was no.
God.
Anyway, look, some contemporary romances do it.
My biggest thing is when one of the characters is a songwriter or a musician or a writer in general, and then they give you, like, excerpts of things that this character has written, and you were like, I don't think you actually have a career, because that was not good. Like, the author is fine, but, like, within it, I'm just like, no, please don't. And then in an audiobook, 10 times worse, especially, like, the singing bits. Ooh.
Have you listened to an audiobook where the narrator has sung
the
words?
Oh, have I? Oh, have I? So many times.
Oh, no.
There's, well, first of all, The Hunger Games. Katniss goes for it a few times. Yeah. Yep. She likes to sing. So that poor narrator showed up to the booth and was like, oh, shit. I gotta sing today. And then there was, just in the Kate Bateman one, A Daring Pursuit. I listened to that earlier today. And she has, like, a little ditty that she sings to a bear. And like, it wasn't like that, like, the narrator had a good singing voice, way better than me, but I'm just like, please don't.
Gives me secondhand. I've never I think the only time I've ever heard, like, if there are song lyrics or something, or a song for whatever reason in a book, I've only ever heard the audiobook narrator just, like, speak
just
the
read
words
it
to the song.
That's what I would do, the bare minimum, because that is the maximum that should be applied to that situation.
I think it was a Sarah MacLean, I think. She's a singer. Or, like, her alter ego is a singer, and and, like, the song is, like, recurring because it's important, and the narrator would just, I think it's Justine Eyre, just, like, read the words, and I was like, thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, there's, like, a Stacy Reid, A Scoundrel of Her Own, I think, where one of the main characters like, sunsets? I don't know. Whatever that word is. Moonlights. There we are.
Wow.
Moonlights. Yeah, we got like, there. It was a circle. She moonlights as a singer, and then he, like, is the only one in her audience because he buys the entire place out, and it's great.
That's hot.
And
that's
I think they just read
right
it.
There.
It was so, yeah, like, so to get on a wee tangent, basically he saved her life.
11 minutes of a tangent.
He saved her life when he was, like, 8 and she was 6, and then she was, like, of noble blood, and he was, like, one of the workers' sons on the estate.
Excellent.
So yes, so then the parents, like, send him off. Like, they stay in a cottage together for, like, 3 days. He's, like, got a festering wound, keeping her alive, and he's, like, 8 years old. And then the parents
want to do,
and then the parents come, they send that boy off. They're like, we don't even care about you, even if you don't get home safely, whatever. And then they, like, bar the daughter from ever seeing him. So then, like, however many years, they're both adults, goes by, and he's obviously now rich, hot as shit. He's got it going for him. And she is, I think she just wants some freedom, so she's a singer, or I think it's to pay off her father's debt as well. Which can always, like, be very tedious for me, but here it really worked because she was just, like, singing, and then he was always been her protector. He, like, found her somehow, and so he's been, like in the shadows, just, like, protecting her and, like, saving her from violent men who are down in the dark underbelly. And then you see her in a previous book, and she's just singing to him, and she doesn't know who he is. And then obviously the big reveal happens. And
all of this is Phantom of the Opera. I mean, it's not actually, it's not at all, but it's giving me Phantom of the Opera vibes.
Very good. Stacy Reid is just fantastic to me. I love her so much. And so you just see her just, like, singing to him, and in, like, a vignette in another book, and you're like, what is going on? And then obviously it's him, and he's, like, told everyone else to stay away, which is, I love that.
Okay, I'm thinking about it. Here's the thing. Is it hot that he bought out the whole theater so that he was the only one in the audience? Yes. However, now that I'm thinking about it, if I were going to perform...
Yes.
and there was just one guy I would actually be really uncomfortable, even if I knew, even if it was like the love of my life. I would be like, this is real uncomfy for me.
I mean, I'm not a singer. I would never.
I am.
Yeah, I would never dare. But she was into it. She was like, I gotta get this bag, so I will do it. She got it multiple times.
Were you, so I know you're not really on TikTok. Were you familiar with the viral, it was like this story that went viral about a particular song that this guy had on his sex playlist?
Yes, that I found it from Twitter, and then I watched.
Yeah. So that sound is still cropping up occasionally on TikTok. However, all of this and all the Phantom of the Opera vibes, this is also a tangent, and we really should talk about the book. But there was a TikTok that is now living in my head rent-free of... It was like a random couple, but he was doing the Phantom of the Opera, like, sing for me, and she goes, and I like lost my mind. Also, I'm gracing you with my my unused singing voice, unwarmed up. Cobwebs just came out. Anyway. That was like, actually, that video lives in my head rent free. It was horrible, and I think about it all the time.
Yeah, that sex playlist, Reddit thing, that was rough.
Can you imagine? For 2 years.
No, and then like her entire family knows. Like,
well, but how do you do that for 2 years? I couldn't do it once.
No.
The instant that song came on, I would be like, hang on. Also, if I were the person who for some reason thought that was a really good song, and 2 years into the relationship, the person I was with was like, I hate this, stop, I would be like, why didn't you tell me 2 years ago?
Yeah, I would not post about it on the internet.
Oh,
like
you
very
pry that out of me. You could not waterboard that story out of me. If it had happened to me, I would have taken that secret to my grave. Beyond the grave.
And he used a very recognizable like name for his like and like it was very easy to guess who that was once someone heard it, and I simply could not imagine.
No. Well, you know who would never do something like that?
Clayborn?
Henry the Duke of Clayborn. He would never.
Oh no.
If that man had a playlist, it would be bangers only. Pun intended.
I just think I was rereading my notes, and most of them were sex scenes, and obviously they have to be. It's the law.
I mean, the whole rest of the book is excellent, but anything that I wanted to write down to remember were in those scenes.
I just, from the start, we have Adelaide trying to steal back some things from her father. He's like what would he be considered? Like not a warlord, but
like a gang leader?
A gang
is that the
leader?
Appropriate term?
Kingpin? I don't know.
Kingpin?
I'm not a bowler. Who knows?
He's like the bully boys. What are they? What are they? Oh, I feel that we're the spoilers. There will be spoilers in this episode for Heartbreaker by Sarah MacLean. You can still listen, obviously, if you don't care about spoilers, but if you do, you should probably read the book.
Oh, I mean, you could read the book, and then
I recommend reading the book before, which actually means you also have to read Bombshell, because
they have a very good bit in Bombshell.
I can't read
where they're like yelling at each other.
Bit. It was good, and then Adelaide is like, "I want his blood" or whatever. Do you know what I'm talking about in Bombshell? I know because the Mary Jane Wells, because I listened to these both on audio, and she like went a little bit unhinged on that line, whatever the line was, where Adelaide was like, "I want vengeance." Like, I don't remember exactly the line, but like, I want his blood. And whatever Mary Jane Wells did to her voice, she sounded like a little gremlin. And I was like, okay, Adelaide, sure. Me too, Queen. I would too if that man said those things to me. If he was like, remember your place, I would be like, I sure know where my foot's place is. And it is up your ass, because the audacity, it's fine.
The audacity of that man.
He recovered. All he had to do was catch one punch with his bare fist, and I was like, well, my pants just flew off my body, so
I just pictured that, so that was fun for me.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so we start the book with Adelaide like sneaking into these we don't?
No, we start the book
no,
with
we
the
start
most
with a
iconic
wedding.
opening scene of all time.
Oh my god, you're right.
Which is a wedding that she doesn't want on a stormy day, which she then suddenly goes, "Oh, my dad has a weapon. Hang on, let me prepare to like fight my way out of something." And then it immediately becomes a gang war in this church.
And that is how the bully boys, they were was it the boys and the bullies? Or like...
Boys, and then his name is,
Trumbull. So it's like bully, and then they were the boys. So her dad wins, and they form the bully boys, and Adelaide escapes because, is it the Duchess?
She sent, there's like a mysterious nun who pulls her out of the room and is like, here are some clothes to help you escape, and this mysterious
and this was all in the past
calling card. Also, I do want to note, because this was like, I already liked Adelaide from book 1. I thought she was great, and I knew she was coming because this Heartbreaker was already out by the time I read it. However, the moment I was like, Adelaide's my new favorite person in the world, is when she, in the middle of this fight, started picking people's pockets. Because she's like the best pickpocket London has ever seen. She's famous for it. And so as she's fighting people in this too small stolen wedding dress, she's picking people's pockets and slipping their stuff up her sleeves. And I was like, okay, so I'm in love with you, is a fun fact about me. Like, that's all it took. Look, I'm easily won over. Hot punch and some pickpocketing. Anyway, then after years? Question mark later?
Multiple years. Yeah, it was like 6
that
or
was
something.
in 1834, and then 5 years later.
Okay, I was so close. I'm gonna count that as a win in my book.
It was a win.
Thank you. So then here's where we open. She's trying to steal, was it some files or something from...
Yeah, like some files in a notebook.
From her father, and then Clayborn walks in, and he thinks he is the cleverest one ever to exist. And he has got like a little like scruff, and he's like in his shirt sleeves.
Yeah, like shirt sleeves, and I assume a waistcoat, and he's got like a cap pulled down, and he's like leaning against the door jamb. This is all like very clear in my mind. I know you don't see things when you read, but this whole scene is like very... But it's like very, very cinematic in my brain. Like her looking up, and he's like leaning against the door with his hat pulled down, thinking he's so slick, only for her to like one of those immediately recognize him.
Old like spy or something, like black and white movies. I can picture the shapes. That's how my brain works. So like I know like the angle in the room.
I mean, I'm willing to bet that his shape is a great one. So
a beautiful one. And she was like, "Whoa, I recognize that shape. That is the shape of the Duke of Clayborn."
That sure is.
And he's like, "How did you recognize me?"
It had me dead. He said, "I was in disguise." You put on a hat. What are you talking about?
Grew a little beard. He Clark Kented it.
Oh. Anyway.
And so he was just astonished. Because he was coming to steal something too. And she was like, she found the thing that he was coming to steal. And then he was like, "Well, please give that to me. That is mine. I am a stranger. You've never seen me, but that is mine." And she's like, "Well, no, I'm not going to do that. I recognize your unducal lips." I mean, there's like a part where she's like angry talking to her friends about him. And she's like, "His unducal lips."
Well, like, because she had just made out with said lips. Because he almost gets them caught. And then they have to go run and fight off a bunch of dudes. And then they like do a dramatic scene where they're like jumping, I don't know, like boat to boat, basically is how I read that. I don't remember. And then they ended up fighting and then making out because obviously, you know, adrenaline high. You have something I want.
And like, was that the moment where like a lock of her hair like fell out?
Oh my god, cap? Yeah, and he's obsessed with it.
So he's never seen her hair before. He's got zero clue. She always wears this like bonnet, like hat thing. And
is that
he
why?
Like, yeah, like he's never seen her hair.
Okay, that scene confused me because I remembered like there's the scene in Bombshell where they're like they meet and he knows who she is, and also he's seen her over and over again. At
I think she always wears like a bonnet, like all of her hair is like up.
Interesting. I thought Okay.
I think that's how it was, because then he, like, sees it, he's like, red.
Yeah, because
He's,
he
like,
said that,
so
and I was like,
entranced.
"Did you not already know that?" Okay,
No, I
I
think
must
because
have
he's always been
completely
like,
missed
"What
something.
color is her hair?" And obviously he's, like, enthralled by this, like, one lock, and then it just unlocked something in him,
See,
and then
I
they
thought
make
he
out.
was just obsessed with it, so he just really wanted to see it because he loved I
Well,
don't know.
because then later on, so he still hasn't seen, like, the full thing. Later on, they're, like, in carriages, and her hat flies off, and he crashes his carriage. So they're in 2 carriages. He crashes his carriage because he sees her hair, and it's, like, flying about, and he's like, "Holy shit. That
Oh, I
is
thought he
so
was just
beautiful."
entranced by it, like, not that he had
I
never
mean,
seen
that
it
is the
before.
underlying
No,
tone
but
is
I just
no,
thought that he just really liked her hair,
I
and
think
every
because
time he sees it, he's like, "Wow."
I believe in my mind, I was like, "She always wears, like, a cap? Like, that would be taxing
I
on
don't
me."
remember that. Okay, we're gonna have to go back and reread
Yep, that
Bombshell.
means I
Either
have
that
to
or
find an
somebody's gonna
ebook.
message us and be like, "Hey,
True.
pull yourselves together." Look, I read this, like, a week ago, I should remember, but alas,
It doesn't work like that.
it
It
sure
simply does
doesn't.
not,
Anyway,
because my memory is horrible.
either he's never seen her hair before and she's always wait, that doesn't make sense to me, though. They've interacted at
I know,
balls.
but she, like, always wears, like, because she's, like, like a weird cousin-ish of the Duchess, so she just is always trying to stay,
Oh,
like,
like a
unnoticed. Yeah, so, like, because her whole
but
thing is,
how
like,
could
no
that
one
cover
notices
all
her.
of her hair?
That's the thing, like,
Okay,
and she's got a lot of hair in
we're
this
gonna have to
cover, at least.
reread.
I
Anyway,
know.
the
I
point
know.
is, this man is obsessed with her, and he has been
Mhm.
for some time, which is
Mhm.
as it should be.
He's like, "No one's noticed her? How?"
Yeah, and it's all made better by the fact that her whole, like, superpower type thing,
Mhm.
a la Chloe and the Duke heist, is that,
Mhm.
like, nobody really notices her ever.
And his
And then,
whole
of
thing is
course
never once has he missed a thing that she's done. And he, like, she gets distracted by him, so it's, like, the first time she gets, like, not the
Mhm.
first time, but, it's very rare for her to get, like, caught out. So when she does have to get into this fight with these bully boys, she's like, "Shit, this is, like, uncharted
This never
territory."
happens to me.
Yeah, I've never seen. And then the whole thing in the book is then she consistently gets seen because he's
I
there
really love that.
saving
I am
her.
a sucker for the, like, I see you.
Mhm.
I mean, I think every good romance is two people who see each other in a way that
Mhm.
nobody else sees that. Like, that's basically every romance
Yeah.
to me. But I really like a little overt, like, "Oh, you're the only person who, like, literally sees me."
Mhm.
Ugh. I gotta hand it to the
Just
Dead Romantics too. I don't love that book, but it sure did the like you are quite literally the only person in the entire world that can see me because I am a ghost and you can
he
see
was a
ghosts.
ghost. And I mean, okay, I know you weren't a huge fan. I loved that book. I don't know what I was on. I was sobbing for half of it. Like,
Sure.
I mean,
The
he's a
funeral got
ghost.
me.
He's a ghost with his, like, shirt sleeves rolled up, and he's just, like, a very good person. A lot of times they have to have, like, a dickish exterior, and, like, he was,
Mhm.
like, a little bit of a dick, like, when they first met. They were both kind of like,
Not really though.
I know, and so he's, like, in touch with his emotions. He's, like, an emotional ghost. Like, he's just a
Maybe that's why it
solid,
didn't work
not
for me.
unsolid guy, because he's a ghost, so he's like, you can't touch him, but he's solid. And, yeah, I needed more command and masturbation, but other than that, I was really into him. Good old Benji.
Maybe he was
Not that
too
name, though.
emotionally available for me. Maybe that was the
Well,
problem.
that's
I
what
love
that's
an
Sarah MacLean's
emotionally unavailable hero.
that's Sarah MacLean's whole thing, why that one duke or something won't get a book. He's too emotionally stable.
Oh, Benedict, do you mean?
Mhm.
The, like,
Mhm.
brother from the first which
Mhm.
I do like him, and I do kind of wish she had gotten one, but
I
she
fully
makes a
wish.
valid point where she's like, "He's too good already," like,
Yeah, but someone needs to break him.
he
Like,
doesn't need to be broken, he's good. You only need to break like, an alpha hero.
That's true. I just feel like, or something needs to, like, jar his, like, worldview. Like, it doesn't need to be, like, an emotionally, like, I don't know. I feel like there could have been something there, you
I think
know?
that you, like, more fully formed like, you like an
Yeah.
emotionally literate, like
Yes.
I don't wanna say, like, a beta hero because that gets confusing.
It
But, like,
depends.
I think you like a
Like,
softer hero than I do. I want, like,
mhm.
Dane, Lord of Scoundrels. I want you to have no idea how to handle any of your feelings, and I want the heroine to ruin your entire life and
Yeah.
then put you back together.
It's really hard for me to articulate it because, like, at moments I want like a very like soft but also like sex in it.
Sure.
Like a very soft romance, like A Daring Pursuit by Kate Bateman. I'm gonna shout it out again.
Romance. God, that book is
like
so good.
there's a lot of external conflict, but like at the end there's no real breakup. He's like, I would like kill, die, lie.
Yeah, what is that line?
He's like, I would lie, I would die, I would kill for her. Like he just says it all. He says all the right things.
I have to go find the exact quote now. I know because it's in my Instagram stories.
Just listen to it. And there's a moment where she's like, oh yeah, he's just marrying me because I could be with child. And he's like, no, we're not going to play that game.
He said, I think not.
And so like, I love when you think you're going to get like the breakup.
Big Rhys Winterborne energy.
Happen. Yes.
Try it.
Yeah, like Rhys, like he's definitely like alpha, but he's also, and does not understand emotion at all. He has like 6 feelings.
No, that's Tom Severin.
Oh my god,
Severin has 5 feelings.
Yes, he's my favorite. He was my favorite hilarious. In that series. Oh, that book
Rhys
so
has
good.
feelings. He just chooses to
smash things.
Well, what is it? He's from, is that North Wales, where we express ourselves by throwing rocks at trees?
Yes, that was the quote you sent me.
I've felt more in the past half hour than I have in my entire life, or whatever it is.
Yep.
That's a great, which is also like my favorite kind of hero. The ones that are like, I don't feel feelings. Why are you doing this?
And like another like favorite hero of mine is obviously like Clayborn-esque, where he's a very like starchy, buttoned up, like cold on the outside, noble person. Most likely they're going to be noble. I mean, sometimes maybe they're not.
They have to be noble.
I know. It just has the extra oomph because they obviously are like having their title and have to be whatever the title wants. And then obviously they're just like freaks in the sheet. And like very like pretty dominant in that sense. But like on the outside that no one else can see besides like the heroine. I'm very into that. I
mean, obviously. By the way, the exact quote, because I found it, because I had posted it to my Instagram stories in July as I was reading it, with a Ted Lasso bent over image of him suffering, is, "You'd lie for her," someone asks, and his response was, "I'd die for her and I'd kill for her too." Which is really all anyone
And this is in front of her brother, her like overprotective brother, the hero of the first book. He's like,
and in front of her, right?
They snuck through a window. They just were like hands and knees in front of a bear going at it. And they like think they're like sneaky, and the brother's just like, so what have you been doing? I can see it. There's like her handprint was on his crotch.
I vaguely remember that scene because it's again been months, but I do in my brain it lives as like him sitting in the dark next to a lamp waiting, and then like turning it on, and he's like,
that's exactly how it was. They like see his shadow, and they're like,
good.
Oh shit. And obviously,
God.
At this point, Tristan's like, well, I'm going to marry her because I want her. But now she thinks that it's just going to be because she's going to be forced to marry me. And then he's all sad about that. And then she wants to marry him. But then she's sad because she thinks he's just going to offer for her because he has to, because he finished inside of her. So they're both having the same thoughts at the same time. And it works because then they just listen to each other. Like, they have a little conversation. They almost have sex when the brother leaves the room and the brother knocks on the door and he's like, hey, we can hear the vibrations. Please stop. And then that's the end of the book. And I had a very good time.
I like an angsty, like, not incredibly drawn out, but like a dramatic third act conflict or breakup of some kind. I'm not like anti-breakup.
No.
It can work. However, I do love and the Duke who didn't is my favorite example of this. When you like you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting, and then they just like completely sidestep the conflict you thought you were gonna get. And it's that's like immediately resolved. And you're like,
yeah, that's kind of how Heartbreaker worked too, a little bit. Because you thought that she was, because at one point she was like, I can't marry him. Like, I'm not going to do it. And he was like, we're going to get married.
He said, no, we absolutely will be getting married.
Yeah, because the father had an ultimatum. He like stole this like puzzle box that the Duke was trying to get. That's what she had like stolen at the beginning. And the father was like, okay, well, I want the Duke's influence. And so you're going to get married and that's what's going to happen. And he's like, damn straight, we're gonna get married. Like he was like immediately
absolutely.
like,
you didn't even have to bribe me. This was gonna happen anyway.
Yeah, and she was like, no, like that's not gonna, like, I'm not forcing you into marriage, like you don't need to be associated with this. And he's like, yes I do. And so like it kind of like, you thought it was gonna be a big moment where she like runs away or something, but I think it pretty much
it does what the Duke
resolved.
Who Didn't does, which is it gives you the conflict that you think you're gonna get, and it resolves that pretty quickly or completely avoids it, and then you get a conflict, but it's an external battle.
And I love when someone's getting shot. There's a Lenora Bell book where they just finished. This is at the end. They just finished having sex. He is in bed naked. Someone runs in, shoots him. He's bleeding. He is naked. And that is the third act conflict. So, because she thinks obviously that he's going to die. There's this like guy that's been tracking them. And nope, there's no breakup. Just naked getting shot. And that is The Devil's Own Duke by Lenora Bell.
Bringing that back to Heartbreaker, there is a scene, the scene in Heartbreaker, I was very confused. Well, so we know Adelaide was naked when Danny, they like, I think.
I was like, do we?
What? Yes. I don't remember.
When was she naked?
It was after the first.
Oh, yeah, so she's like on a sheet.
Yeah, yes. So Danny like busts in the middle of the night with that other guy who was super drunk. And he like threatens her, and she's like wrapped up in a sheet, and he's being gross and pervy and also threatening her life and all of this. Meanwhile, Clayborn is like fighting them off and doing all these things, and the whole time they're talking about like, oh, if only we'd gotten dressed afterward. So that whole scene, I was like, is he naked this whole time? Like, did he throw on his trousers real quick when he heard noises?
I don't remember. He must have thrown on his trousers.
Like, surely, right? Because, again, I was listening to the audio, so sometimes I, like, miss a detail, and then I was in the car, so I couldn't, like, rewind a bunch to find it.
I have the E-arc here, because that's what I have my notes in. I found this. But, yeah, I definitely remember that. And I remember, like, any time when someone is naked on accident. Clothes. Let me search. I'm like in
the chapter.
I will let her find that. Yeah, I mean, my favorite.
No, I found it. He said,
"Oh no."
The thought clarified in the darkness, and the door to the room splintered open, slamming back into the wall with force of a heavy boot. And then there was no needing to protect her; there was only doing it. Adelaide shot up from her slumber, the bedclothes falling to her waist, and Henry shouted, "Stay!" even as he was out of the bed, already reaching for his blade. But there's never any mention.
Pants.
I'm not seeing any mention of pants, unless I'm just like I've skimmed it and missed it. This is going to be another one of those things that if somebody wants to write and correct us, please do.
The only thing,
but in my head, he's naked this whole time.
That's not going to be canon. The only thing I could see is like if for some reason he like put something on after. Sometimes that happens. But she was definitely fully naked. I love that. And now that whole scene, because then he's just getting like whipped around, like he's doing the whipping, but then he's also like
destroyed.
Yep. Like, and then at one point he's like very concussed and just like down for the count. And then you get, was that one of 2 sick scenes, or were there 2, or is it just the main one where?
I mean, to be honest, he's gravely injured for most of this book.
Yes,
he's just like,
and they like derail their entire journey to stay. Because he got beat up. And at one point he like wakes up from like his half coma, half like delirious state, and he sees that Adelaide is bleeding, and he's sits up, and it was like there's this MMA or like whatever MA fighting where the guy like raises from the coffin and like turns around and like stares directly into the camera, and that's him when he realized that she's got like a cut, and he's like, stop what you're doing to me, like go to her now, like figure her out, like she cannot bleed. He's like, when I wake back up she will not be bleeding. And he's like, no room
it's the same energy as like whenever a heroine is sick or whatever and a hero threatens the doctor and is like, she lives. Like, if she doesn't live, you don't live. And you're like, that's not how this works.
And normally she's giving birth.
Alpha hero energy.
So there's, like, the added, like, having to find a doctor in, like, a limited time. And, oh, so good.
She doesn't live. You don't live. Makes no sense, and I love alpha heroes for it every time.
Mm-hmm. And so he definitely was, like, trying to, like, stave off, like, all of, like, the people trying to help him, probably, like, get him decent. He's like, no. She's the priority, and to me, that's the priority.
Well, the best part is that it's, like, a scratch. Like, quite I mean, it's on her neck, but it's, like, a scratch. And she's
she
like,
was, like,
it's
being
fine.
held at knife, like, against her throat, I think.
Yeah.
And she was like, I don't care.
She's like, I'm literally so good right now. It doesn't even hurt. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. And so then it transitions to, obviously, like, her taking care of him, and, like, they're, like, a little horny, but he's a little too injured at this point.
Not for long, though.
No, not for long, though, because then he gets well enough, and he's like, come sit.
Well,
come up here.
Well, we have an excellent shaving scene, which I am a sucker for a shaving scene. I really am. I could never, ever shave someone.
Mm-mm.
And it makes me a little anxious, even knowing this is fiction. This is a romance. Nothing bad could possibly happen in this moment. But every time, the thought of, like, holding a blade to someone's throat, I'm like, no, I actually wouldn't. I would be like, well, looks like you're going to be scruffy until you can do it yourself. Because...
Well, and there was definitely a book where he was, like, shaving with a freaking, like, pirate sword.
oh, no.
Like, no, like, one of those, like, pirate-shaped things. Yeah. I was like, that's going to be a no for me.
We need to do an episode just on shaving scenes, because off the top of my head, we have this one. Devil's Daughter has a really good shaving scene that also obviously results in a sex scene.
And she's, like, very proud of it. And I'm like, yes, I couldn't do that.
It's hot.
Go you.
That's a great scene. And there's some talk during it. It's good. And then also, Devil in Winter has, like, what's the word I'm looking for?
Recurring?
No, it's like mirroring almost, when he shaves her father as he's dying, and it's, like, very tender and lovely that he like did this and shaved her father. And then later, when he's injured, she shaves him, and it, like, calls back to that earlier scene, which is, I don't remember if that one turned sexy or not, but it did make me emotional. So. I mean, it's Sebastian, so one of my two favorite, as we know, blonde Sebastians that become dukes. So, like, the odds of it becoming sexy or high, I just don't remember if it actually did. Anyway, this shaving scene, listen, the Duke of Clayborn can get it. The irony, by the way, he
got it.
Most of our discussion being about the Duke of Clayborn is that in my head, most romance writers either write heroes or write heroines. Unless we're talking about queer romance, obviously, in which case that's a whole other thing. But if it's a straight romance writer, some are really good with heroines and some are good with heroes. And I think Lisa Kleypas is a hero writer, and I think Sarah MacLean is a heroine writer. So it's kind of odd that I love the Duke of Clayborn, because, like, I like her previous heroes, almost all of them.
Yeah, Sarah has said that this is as close to the daddy kink as she has ever written.
Maybe that's what does it.
and Duke of Clayborn, he is daddy, because he, like, says good girl. He's, like, very into, like, there at one point he was like, my girl was hurt or something. I was like,
he doesn't know my girl thing, and I like that. I'd like to be clear, I love Adelaide.
The quote is, his poor girl was exhausted.
Oh, that's adorable.
I was like, oh my god.
On the one hand, if, like, a man in real life called me a girl, I'd be like, But if it was,
I think there's got to be a context around it.
Right. If it's this situation and it's a hot man who I am in love with, and he said my girl, like, then we're okay.
I love when, like, the heroine's like her man, or like my man, and like there's like a Lorraine Heath that, like, revolves around that, and like she's like his woman, whatever. And so he's, like, very obviously, because, like, Adelaide is, like, very independent and, like, very strong, and so she needs someone to just, like, tell her it's okay to feel things, and to, like, have someone take care of you. Like, you don't have to be alone all the time. And so that's, like, his major role is to just, like, take care of her.
As he should.
Sexually.
As he should. Really, what else are men even good for? But I did want to talk about Adelaide for a second, because I feel odd talking almost entirely about the man when the heroine is so good.
She, in the audiobook, she sounds like Keely from Ted Lasso. So she's already got just so much energy in such a small frame.
She's
Like,
not
I
that
just
small.
pictured
I thought she was
Keely.
tall.
I do not know. I just picture Keely. Like, that's what I'm picturing
Interesting.
from Ted
I'm
Lasso.
pretty sure she's like an unusually tall woman. To be fair, a
That would
lot
be
of
good.
Sarah MacLean's heroines, and I note it because I read them all back to back,
Mm-hmm.
and so I like most of them. There would be a comment about like, well, she's unusually tall for a woman, and I was like, because of course she is.
Yep.
I think
Can't
she is
say
a
the
little
same,
tall.
but good for her.
Not me, but that's okay. I wasn't written by Sarah MacLean, unfortunately.
No.
Actually,
No.
tragically, if I'm being honest, because boy, would my life be a lot more exciting if I had been.
This is very true. Sad.
I just like I love a class difference, and normally I like the like lady and the lower class or like working class hero dynamic. I like that a lot. Mainly because I think women are already at a disadvantage. And so when you put them at like a lower social or financial standing than the hero, it's like an even greater power imbalance, especially when you have a duke. But somehow the power never actually feels like imbalanced at all because they're so well matched the entire time.
Like they're always
entire time.
at the
They
same
even
level.
have the conversation where they decide to do this little like she's like race me basically. Like, oh, you're going after him too? Fine. And they're both clearly into it at the beginning when they're about to take off. And
he's like so
Duchess
hurt.
And Maggie.
And
they're like, it's going to be like cat and mouse. And she's like, okay, but am I the cat or the mouse? And they said, you're the cat because
obviously.
But like really both of them are both cat and mouse, which I like it works so well because she has a much lower social and financial status, but she number one uses that to her advantage. Like she's intentionally forgettable in social situations. And she's like like basically Covent Garden or wherever she's from, South Bank royalty. Like
I have zero clue.
Her dad is like king of
do
I don't understand places in London either, but he's like a gang leader. She's regularly called like a princess. And also she's like a famous pickpocket.
And she was like spent time in jail.
Like
as like
famous
a child.
for not getting caught also, except for like as a child. Like
because like she was taught that when you get caught, you know, snitches get stitches. She was never a snitch, but thieves get some grief. I don't know. That's one for the books. And to wax poetic for just a second about the face sitting.
Oh, sure. As well,
the face sitting.
As we do anytime it comes up in any book.
There have been a few. I have a rolling note somewhere of books where that becomes a thing. And I just read one the other day, and the heroine didn't want it. She was like, "No, I'm gonna sit on your cock instead." And I was like, "But why not both?" He was like, "Come on."
I have a. We don't have time for this tangent, but it's not face sitting, but it is standing up 69. And if you're like, how's that possible?
What?
It was also in Patience, the wild book that I read. He
Were
like
they on the moon?
Scoops her up from the ground. No, I guess he's just got like mad core strength.
Oh, so he's just like holding.
He's holding her upside down with her legs like over his shoulders. And then it's a 69. And that was in that same scene that I was shocked multiple times. Make it 3 times that I was shocked because he just picked her up and did that. And I was like, core strength.
Let's supersize the shock. There was a book.
What do you mean?
There was a book. It was Witcha Gonna Do by Avery Flynn. The sex scenes were very colorful. I wasn't a huge fan of the book, but the sex scenes were a fun time. And at one point, though, he's against the wall. She is in front of him. She's got her like legs wrapped around his waist. And then at some point, she like gets them flat against the wall. She's like holding onto his arms and she's like pistoning onto the dick. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, how are you that strong? What?
Possible?
I don't know. I was sitting in the car next to my dad. We were driving home from New York and I was trying to like not like very noticeably like move my hands to just like see like how does one do this
physically?
Like I need 2 Barbies. I need 2 Barbie dolls because just the momentum that she's gotta. I don't know. That one leaves me in a trance because I was like, did I read this wrong? Like, was she against the wall? No. So I think I said she like yo-yoed on his dick, and then she was like embarrassed at one point. I was like, girl, you just completed like Cirque du Soleil.
Like, yeah, you actually just defied the laws of gravity is like, what you did.
You're fine. Like, you don't need to be like awkward when you wake up. Like, we've been through some shit now.
All right. Well, that's a next level.
One more thing for this book that we're supposed to be talking about.
The one that we should
I said at the end of our first intro episode that there was mild ass play. And I found the section.
Right. I went back and found it too.
Mm-hmm. And he's like, what is it? His tongue tracking over secret places and his fingers sliding over her bottom, finding another secret place, painting slow, languid circles until she was beyond herself, panting his name and begging him not to stop. And yep, I was like, you go.
It was very like, Kleypas style, vague mention.
Very like vague.
Where yeah, because like, suddenly that other place.
Mm-hmm.
And then nothing else, and you're like, okay.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah, that one wasn't, because obviously, like, I generally hate when, like, something's, like, teased like that, and then, like, not fulfilled. But, like, that one was fine, because I never really, like, I mean, she was like, yeah, I'm into this, but it was, like, a different level than, like, there's, I think, a Megan Frampton, where she talks about these ribbons, and then they do shit with ribbons, but you never get to see it, and I'm just like, we bought the ribbons. We were with him. Yes. When they were purchasing the ribbons, and it still lives in my mind.
That is rude. Yeah. If something is mentioned, that's true of, like, plot things also, where it's like, why did you bring this up? But it's almost worse when it's just for fun, because you're like, oh, we could have had it all.
Yeah.
Why include it?
I mean, it happened a little bit in this one, right? With the spanking, or, like, he was like, we're going to explore that later.
That didn't really bother me, because, like, this is not the kind of, like, I wasn't expecting a third scene.
So I think, like, it depends. Like, I especially despise it if, you know, the book only has, like, one scene and you get, like, nothing. This book had enough to where you were pretty okay with your life after reading satisfied. It. Mm-hmm.
Also, plot-wise. Yeah. Which, like, I barely remember the plot, if I'm being honest. It's a road trip where they're after his brother who is eloping.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was a whole, like, murder plot thing. The thing with me and, like, romance external plots is that I don't care 9 times out of 10. Like, I care in as much as it feeds the romantic plot. Like, I need it to make sense enough that I understand why the main characters are doing what they're doing and why they're in the situations. But I don't actually care about the external plot. You could have told me anything, and I'd have been like, sure. Was I glad that the bad guy got stuck in or that they, like, ruined his life and left him in the little door under the church where the explosives used to be, and then ruined Tommy Peck's day? Yeah. I'm glad that guy got what was coming to him, particularly after murdering a guy and then trying to kill his own daughter for witnessing said murder.
Yes. I was like,
however,
I've got to be honest, had zero clue what she was talking about.
Yeah, was like, anytime they're like, it's heist time, let's plot things out, I'm like, I'm not following the plan. I'm just gonna hope that I figure it out as I go along.
It depends for me. I mean, I am not what you'd call street smart, so, like, you can have a mystery and I will be blown away 9 times out of 10 because I do not pick up
obvious. Me too.
I do not pick up on cues. I just, like, I don't, like, either I'll, like, skim on accident, or the audiobook, like, my brain will be elsewhere. And I'll miss, like, one sentence, and it's, like, a very crucial sentence, and then it, like, hinges the entire book on that one sentence. I'm like, that is
sometimes I will just, like, fully process the things and still not connect dots.
That, too. Or I'll just draw wild conclusions that don't actually happen, and sometimes I will play myself because they'll be more interesting than what actually happens.
I've done that with, like, I should have guessed the plot twist. There's a 3-book series, and I should have guessed the plot twist of the second book because I had already read the summary for the 3rd book. And if I had been using my little brain, if those neurons had been firing, I would have understood, like, I would have guessed what the plot twist of the 2nd book was. But for whatever reason, I didn't. And as I was reading the 1st book, I, like, created this whole, like, I like theorized how we were gonna get to book 3, and I was like, oh, this is who, like, and then her husband is gonna do this, and then he's gonna die, which is how she becomes a widow in this book, and all of this. And then I got to the reveal, which was in like chapter 2 of the second book, and I was like, oh,
there we are.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, there was one, The Royal We. It's like a contemporary royalty one, and it's the longest book of my life. It was like 16 hours on audiobook. That's before I started speeding them up. I think at the end of that one, though, I was listening at like 3.0 speed because I was done with my life. But the main guy just wasn't. He was like the perspective. He was going to be king next in line, and I just wasn't feeling him. I was like way more into like the reckless brother, and they tease. I swear that they tease that the brother and her were going to get together, and that was going to be like the whole thing. No, that didn't happen. And then I sat there for 8 more hours. That was like 50%. And I was like, what did I just listen to? And then there was another book. What more do you have to say? You've talked to me for 16 hours. And then there was another equally long book. And I had to cry, and I did not listen to that. And I was just like, because I just couldn't imagine, because it all started, she was like at a wedding, and it was her wedding. And so then you like start there, and then obviously like go back in time, and then where they first meet, and then you work up to the wedding because obviously they had issues. I was like, what a wild ride it would have been if you thought she was getting married to the one brother, but she was getting married to the other brother. But no. And like, I can see where it would have made people angry, but also would have been way more interesting.
Didn't we literally have a conversation?
We did
2 days.
It takes
ago?
it takes a very skilled
about
author.
Angelika Frankenstein. It's like you have to end with the one you start with, otherwise we'll riot.
Yes, and so like I get it, but also, is there like
to
a deleted
clarify
scene?
Angelika Frankenstein does follow the rules. You end with the one you start. This is an Angelika Frankenstein stan account.
It is, and the thing is, Frankenstein class. What happens to Frankenstein? He is made out of other. Oh, okay, Frankenstein's a monster.
Frankenstein.
What happens? He makes a monster out of multiple people. There are multiple people in that poor monster.
Because people are giving Angelika Frankenstein makes her match. Which, by the way, is fine if you don't like that book, but if you don't like the book because he's made out of body parts that she sews together
and he's a corpse reanimated. If
that's why you don't like it, I think that maybe you should check out Spark Notes for the original source material.
And see, I get not reading summaries. I am a chronic offender. I don't do it. But even the cover, she's got a little thread. She's got some stitches on there. There's like a needle.
I feel like if you are somebody who doesn't read summaries, you're not allowed to be mad when the book is exactly what the summary says it's going to be, because it's on you then for not doing your
so like
due diligence.
I have realized, like, I'll normally like start without reading the summary, and then I'll go back once I'm like, is this how it's gonna go?
But yes, in this case, it's literally called Frankenstein. Like,
yes,
it's Frankenstein,
and
it's Frankenstein fan fiction. It's not Frankenstein.
Absolutely, and like I totally get if you don't like it. It's a very weird book, and I mean, I was sad. I was sad when he was like, "This isn't my body," and I was like, "Oh, that's sad," but I got over it.
That is a weird book, and I enjoyed it a lot.
It was so odd. I'm so happy I loved it, because I love Sally Thorne. I am a Sally Thorne stan. Do with that what you will. But I mean, I was prepared to hate it, because I've been disappointed multiple times in my life. So I was ready. But I would have been way more angry if she would have ended up with Christopher. But then I saw like
spoiler,
the little,
but like not really, because
it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be a spoiler.
And if that bothers you,
end up with the random other guy. She ends
if
up
that
with
bothers you, then don't read the book. Like if you've heard me say Christopher does not end up with her, and then you're like reading and you're like, oh shit, get out, just get out. Don't continue. But he's got a cute love story of his own, so I just think I want that book. So Sally in a Facebook Live was like, if it gets good reception, she will write Victor Frankenstein's book. And I now see every review, and I'm like, please just go with your heart, Sally. Just write his book.
Interesting.
Like a prequel.
I don't know that I would want his book. Victor was like...
It's a lot of space.
Anyway, I don't know if I want Victor's book, because he was...
I really liked him once we got going.
I liked him at the beginning, and then I got sick of him. And then by the end, he had kind of redeemed himself. And and I don't believe in, almost, with some exceptions, any irredeemable characters in romance. So I'm sure if he got his book, I would be,
well, and his
would
be like the prequel. So it would be him, I think, meeting.
So he wouldn't even develop to the point that I would, because his character arc happens in this book where he becomes like not terrible. That would
we
be
may
hard.
not be a Victor Frankenstein stan account.
We may not.
If that book gets written, we will see. You may witness a live fisticuffs.
Okay.
Or a recorded
fisticuffs, wrap up,
I suppose.
On the book we were actually supposed to be talking about.
Yes. Heartbreaker, Sarah MacLean. We're both
do we want to
looking at our copies.
I feel like we talked about the sex for most of this, and I should clarify that this book is really, really excellent and so romantic.
Yeah, it's not capital R romantic. That was in my review. I was
so
like, this is just the most romantic book I've read. Like, there are just so many parts that we haven't talked about, like little quotes from him or her. And I wasn't necessarily like feeling it 100% at the beginning, but like right as soon as they just got together, like on the road trip part, I was like, yes.
I was into it from the start. That's interesting.
She
got me with the wedding fight scene, and then I was, and then with the, once again, we come back to him catching a punch in his bare
that
fist,
always helps.
For what? Also, him being so offended, which is like a recurring bit, and one that I really enjoyed, was her being like, "Can you fight?" And he's offended that she would even ask, and then he takes down a bunch of like giant burly men. And like,
and the only reason he
fights all of them, and then repeatedly people keep insulting his ability to fight, and he's like, I fought for 6 years at school, and they're like, oh, ha ha, and then he's like, Adelaide, you were there, like, you saw me take all those guys down.
But plot twist, he wasn't fighting, like, it was like underground fighting, because he was feeling things, and he didn't want to be feeling things, so he's like, I'm gonna go get punched, but he did the punching.
Sure, because he's an alpha hero.
And he had a whole
he hits things.
His whole backstory was very touching to me. I thought it was going to go the normal way with daddy issues, but it was like a different avenue of daddy issues. And like his father was a very good person, and like that to me is always because like his father was so good. I know
the most romantic letter that was ever written, I think. And it was not even the main couple, it was his parents.
Yeah, to sum it up, my views of Clayborn, this is what I wrote in my review. I said, Clayborn is a literary equivalent of rolled up sleeves and a proper Mayfair accent doing very dirty things with very intense eye contact. He's just very intense about everything that he does, and he's looking at you while he is fighting, while he's fucking, while he's doing anything. He's just staring at you.
I think it's
saying
funny
good girl.
Saying good girl. When we
saying
meet him
that,
in
he's saying
Bombshell,
that's it. You can take it all.
Oh my God.
Like
just saying all the things. I think it's interesting when we have talked for way too long. I think it's interesting when we meet him
only
in Bombshell.
an hour.
All right.
Sorry,
when we
everyone's like, it's really an hour.
Yeah. When we meet him in Bombshell, there's like, because we're only getting, I think, Cecily's POV at that point, because it's at the party that she's at. And she describes him as being basically like a bore. Like, he's just a really boring party guest that gets invited to stuff, and then he's like rude to Adelaide, and then he semi-redeems himself when we hear him go off on the like Marquis or whoever that guy was, and was like, you know, like he snapped at him in private, and then you find out that he was trying to like prevent her from making a really powerful enemy by like putting her in her place, and you're like, all right, Duke, whatever. You could have stepped in, but sure. But I think it's so funny that they're like, yeah, he's kind of boring. He's just that guy, that Duke. And it turns out he's not boring. He's just really intense.
He's a bore in the streets and a score in the sheets.
Oh. Fine.
I did it, and I don't regret it.
Fine.
Also, to close it out, the hms, the way that he's like,
the hms.
Like, obviously, I can't do it. But Mary Jane Wells does it very well, and he's just always, like, when he
really
could say something, he's just like, Ugh.
I love a man who, like, I love a, like, really clever, witty, bantery, like, usually rakes are like that, like, they're very quick.
Mm-hmm.
But I do love the, like, he's not afraid to
Silent.
stop and think.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very attractive. And Adelaide, I don't think she really does. She'll, like, fill the silence when he doesn't talk.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's uncomfy for
And
her.
he loves it.
You know what else, we're supposed to be closing this out. However, I want to talk about Adelaide. Another thing about Adelaide, because I love this woman. And that is that and I think this probably might be something that bothers other people. However, I eat it up every single time. And that is when the heroine doesn't, like, not necessarily that she has, like, body issues or, like, doesn't think that she's pretty, but that she just, like, doesn't really think she's pretty. Where she's like, no, I'm just, like, I've got other skills. Like, I'm not pressed about it, but, like, I'm not pretty. And the hero is, like, angry about it. And is like, I'm going to convince you that you are gorgeous. And this really pressed those buttons for me. Especially because she, like, verbatim was like, I just have other skills.
Yeah. And she's, like not, like, upset. I do love that when they just, like, they feel, like, a very self-awareness that they're just like, I get it. Or, like, sometimes they'll be like, I'm not ugly. But, like, right, but I'm not, compared to this person over here, I'm forgettable.
Well, I do love the self-awareness. Also, like, it really touches on the, like, there is a somebody for everybody, and that, like, maybe she is plain, like, objectively, but he finds her, like, gorgeous.
Yeah.
So maybe she is plain, but not to the Duke of Clayborn.
May I introduce what is this Tessa Dare book called? I know you're not a huge Tessa Dare person.
I don't have anything against Tessa Dare. I've just only read a couple of her books.
I believe it's Romancing the Duke. So, Romancing the Duke by Tessa Dare. An amazing book. The hero is blind. He got into a fight that, like, caused his blindness. So he can see a little bit in, like, very high light. And he can see, like, shadows and kind of, like, reflect, like, you can see a little bit. So our heroine thinks she is the plainest person to ever walk this earth. Her father was a fairy tale writer, and he like left her nothing when he died. So then she basically gets this note saying she inherited a castle, and when she gets there, it's this very big man in this castle, and she doesn't realize at the beginning that he's blind. And so he's like, you are just, like, so sultry and, like, beautiful and, like, the hottest person I've ever held in my arms, because he obviously picks her up. And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, I am, like, not noteworthy at all. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, you feel so good. And then she realizes, she's like, oh, he just can't see me. So that explains it, because I am not pretty. And then at one point, she's, like, standing in, like, this bright light, and he, like, sees, like, a halo around her, because, like, he can only, like, make out, like, her hair. And he's like, your hair is so beautiful. And he's like, I don't know what you're on, but you are the most beautiful person I have ever seen. And it was just very sweet. And then, like, because the whole thing was that her father wrote her, like, he, like, wrote her into the fairy tale, but she had, like, very straight hair, and she had very curly hair in real life. And she was tall, but she was very short in real life, or maybe it's the opposite. I don't quite know. But all of her insecurities were fixed by the fake, storybook character. And then at one point, like, it has a fandom. So it's got, like, a historical fandom, which is amazing. And they have LARPers come to the castle thinking that she is there and she's going to give them, like, space to sit about because she's, like, a celebrity to them. And he thinks he is atrocious. It's, like, kind of like a Beauty and the Beast thing. He thinks he's atrocious because he has this big, like scar that blinded him. And she's like, don't go to the window. Like, don't go to the window. They are going to see you, and I don't want to deal with it. And he's like, well, that's insulting. I'm not that ugly. So he goes to the window, and she's like, well, shit, you've done it. And it's because he looks exactly like the fairy tale prince. Like, he's, like, hot as shit. And he's like, I can't, like, that's really rude of you to say that, like, I'm that, like, ugly. And she's like, no, you're that hot. And now they think you're real. I love a good
assuming that you think I'm ugly moment.
Mm-hmm.
Lord of Scoundrels, anyone?
Exactly. And she just, like,
I'm going to bring up Lord of Scoundrels in every episode, too.
And there was, like, a moment where she was like, I have to break it to you. I am not beautiful. Like, you're just, like, you think I am. I'm not. And she, like, it was this whole thing for her. And he's like, you're wrong. And it was beautiful. I love that book. I feel like it's very underrated because I think it's in the same series as the When the Scot Ties the Knot and Say Yes to the Marquess. And those two, I think, get talked about more than this one. But this is my favorite in the series. Yep. It is. It's the Castles Ever After series by Tessa Dare. But that one was just so fun. And on that note...
No, we have to end on a note about the book we came to talk about.
Oh, gosh.
Rapid fire. What's your favorite part?
I think mine...
not having an answer prepared.
Mine was when he thought she was bleeding and he just rose from the dead and was so offended that they were tending to him. I think that did it for me. It was just hilarious.
That's so fair. He's so mad about it.
He is. He's like, when I wake up, she better be healed. Like, how?
He's so funny. That's fair. That's really, really high on my list, if not my favorite.
What else? I do always love a moment when the main characters are like picturing their children if they want them, and they're like her like fire-headed or fire-haired bespectacled little girls because that's how she looks, and then she's like, I want little stern like boys, and I think that's always cute too.
That's cute. I think actually my favorite moment is when you find out, or she tells him that she stole the letter back from her father. Yeah. And she's like, because of course I did. Because that just is so Adelaide. Because, like, shit's hitting the fan. Things are chaos in this moment. She is, like, about to forcibly get married to this man who she wanted to marry anyway, but then tried to talk out of marrying her. To keep him out of this whole world, only for him to be like, absolutely not, we will be getting married right now, which, by the way, they didn't, like, have a special license at that point or something, right? Like, it was later he went and got a special license, so I don't understand how any of that would
I thought the father had one. I thought the father brought one.
I don't know how the father would have gotten one.
That is very true.
You have to, like, go to the Archbishop of
Or did they not, did they just bring a priest? Yeah.
Yeah, they just went and got, like, the vicar, and I was like, you can't just get married. Anyway, and then the bad guys show up, and you're like, oh, this is the conflict I was waiting for, and then a fight ensues, and all these things happen, and then later, she's like, yeah, I pickpocketed him immediately to get that letter back.
I may be making this up, but there wasn't, like, a moment for him to get a special license, was there, somewhere along the way? I feel...
No, there's a mention, because
she shows up alone. Yeah. Because she shows up to this thing alone, so I don't know if he, like, went off.
No, he just comes to find her, but neither of them know that a wedding is going to be taking place. Later, they do get a special license and get married because they want to, which is why. And I remember because they were about to get married, and I was like, "Don't we need like the banns haven't been read? Don't you need a special license?" And then I was like, "I don't know anything about British law. Maybe the law had changed at this point. Who's to say?" But then later, there's a mention of him getting a special license for that.
I'm looking at it now. Yeah.
So I don't understand what's going on there.
So they didn't, I think the father was just kind of mistaken, because then he didn't actually, it was like, while Elfie Tremble's plans had gone sideways and he had not overseen the wedding of his daughter, so somehow, it was like the following day that they got married.
Right.
So
But like, even if they had they couldn't have gotten married then, because there wasn't a special license, which is why I was confused.
Yeah. Maybe he just didn't know. I didn't know before I started reading historical romance.
Yeah, but he was living in the time period. He would have known.
Maybe he's just so busy killing people and being a bully.
Actually, you know what my real favorite part is? My real favorite part is the very end of the book. Or not is it the very end, or is it? Sorry. Right before the epilogue, at the end of the book.
Ooh, where the hell
in
am
which
I in my book?
Detective Inspector Thomas Peck was having a bad day, which is always my favorite. Bombshell 2. Detective Inspector Thomas Peck.
It can be your second favorite part, because that is a character in another book.
Shh.
He's having a
It is my second favorite part. My favorite part for that, well, I have many favorite parts for them.
Yes.
I feel like they have a lot of small moments, so it's hard to pick one.
They do. Really. That's why it's so romantic.
Her because picking the pocket to get it back.
But so the next book is gonna slap.
Yeah.
She invents chloroform.
Good for her.
I know.
He was like, "What happened to the explosives?" And she was like, "Oh, that's weird. They're not there anymore." Huh. Crazy. And he's like, Imogen, please.
There was a marvelous scene in the first book, too.
Yeah.
Where she just blows up his world. Quite literally.
Literally. Oh, that poor man. I love him. He's
going
funny.
to get ruined by love.
He already has been. His whole life has been ruined at this point. He's having another bad day, and he's like...
I loved in the first book when Caleb was like looking at Cecily in the bar and he was like, ooh, she's so hot. And then Thomas Peck is there too and he's like, whoa, who is that? And Caleb's like, stay away. And he's like, no, not that one. That one.
Like, I identify so strongly with Imogen in that moment. She has a line where she says something about like, it's a waste of those thighs.
Yes.
And I was like, why am I Imogen? Why is that something I think I've actually said?
And you know that book is gonna hit every single right note because that wasn't this book. You know, like she didn't write their story yet. She like waited until the next book to write their story. So she's been like thinking up some great things for that book. Because I just love that she was like, I'm gonna take my time with them because they need it.
Oh yeah.
And I am excited.
I am deeply curious about Duchess as well.
I know.
I have a couple of theories, none of which I feel confident in.
We can hypothesize maybe once the third book.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll know. Or maybe it'll be a secret. Who knows?
Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was a half hour longer than it was supposed to be.
What is time, really? I mean, you can skip whatever you want.
That's true. If anyone's made it this far, congratulations. Another prize. Let us know. And once again, I'm confronted with the fact that I don't know how to end a podcast because I never listen to podcasts all the way to the ending. You can follow us on socials.
Yes, socials. Fringe Book Reviews. Salty Caroline reads. On that note, I bid you adieu.
Cheers.
She saluted you, just so you know.